Okay. So, I have seen the...
You finally got to see the Snyder trilogy.
Absolutely.
What are your initial thoughts on those?
All right, first off, it was a lot of time invested into it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think I'd have to invest so much time in it. I appreciate that I did it, but I don't think I would do it again. I'm a big fan of Zack Snyder's films, believe it or not. Before I even, I had to take some time to look into him a bit more, and it turns out there's a few movies that I really like from him. Namely, 300, which was a surprise to me, and, the 2000s remake of Dawn of the Dead. And I'm a huge fan of horror movies, and I really thought that one was really scary, and I enjoyed it very much so.
He actually did that one with James Gunn.
Which is very interesting considering now they're both in the superhero industry right now.
Mm-hmm.
But from Man of Steel to the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League, I felt that the quality of the movies went from great, interesting, to slowly being confusing in how it's structured in terms of telling the story. Because it felt like a lot of the moments with, especially Dawn of Justice and Justice League, it was going forward and backwards in time regarding alternative realities and stuff, and it was very confusing for me as just an average viewer. Especially regarding the in Dawn of Justice, where there was this post-apocalyptic place, and I didn't even know what was going on. It didn't click until the end of the Snyder cut for sure, but if I was just some guy watching that movie alone, it would not make any sense to me.
Well, so the original plan for the Snyderverse, we'll call it, was never supposed to be Man of Steel, Batman vs Superman, and then so on and so forth. Sorry, Zack wanted all the characters to get their own time.
Right.
He wanted to do individual movies. He wanted to do a second Man of Steel movie, but it just Warner Brothers was like, "Yo, we got to play catch up to Marvel and what they're doing, so that we can, make bank on this whole superhero trend right now." So, sorry. This past weekend was SnyderCon, which
SnyderCon.
And you don't believe me?
I don't.
I promise you, it's a thing. You can look it up right now.
I'll look it up right now. I mean, SnyderCon just seems like one of those things that they make up R.R. Martin Con or something like that.
No, so what it was is that it was a 3-day event hosted by Zack Snyder and his wife Deborah, and it was watch-alongs of the trilogy, and they did Q&As and all this other stuff.
Here we go.
And
2023 Justice League event.
Yeah. So, okay. And one of the main things behind it was to raise money for suicide prevention.
Oh, that's actually pretty good. Noble cause.
So the whole reason the Snyder Cut thing even became a thing is because when he stepped away, it's because his daughter had committed suicide.
Oh.
And that was a big part of the Snyder Cut movement, was raising money for suicide prevention in honor of Zack and his family.
So it wasn't just a demand to see this uncut film. It was actually for a good reason.
So he obviously had to step away from the movie to grieve and do all the things, because losing a kid
is devastating.
It is.
No one recovers from that.
As someone who's about to be a parent, you never want the thought of losing your kid.
Absolutely.
Ever. So that happened, and then Warner Brothers just kind of this is going to be ours now. That's when they brought in Joss Whedon. He essentially reshot the whole movie. I don't know if you've seen the theatrical cut of Justice League.
I have not.
So
I've seen bits and pieces in the Snyder Cut, though.
So so nothing in the Snyder Cut is anything that Joss Whedon directed.
No.
Everything in the Snyder Cut is 100% Zack Snyder.
Okay.
There are some clips in the theatrical cut that are Zack's, but most of it Joss Whedon reshot.
Okay. It wasn't so much because of I figured this would be Joss Whedon's, or it just felt like some scenes with stuff regarding Aquaman, it felt like something Joss Whedon would have written down. Some of the scenes felt a bit jarring with having soundtrack songs, not scores, but actual pop music being played or something like that, like during a scene. It felt a bit off, but it felt like something James Gunn would do, or like not James Gunn, Joss Whedon.
So, everyone likes to complain about the tonality of Batman vs Superman, how it's so dark and whatnot, and how Man of Steel was kind of dark for Superman. But like the whole point of what Zack was trying to do, especially in regards to Superman, is show what the real world, how the real world would react to someone like Superman in our world. And honestly, that's something I think is really cool, and what I really enjoyed about it was, hey, this isn't just the same old Superman movie. Like, this is something different where, like, we could be on to something here.
I felt like they had some great plans for it, and I do feel like it could have been a lot better if they had paced themselves more by offering like more movies and Warner Brothers actually accepting it.
Yeah.
Because with the Zack Snyder cut and the Dawn of Justice movie, it felt like a lot of that could have been spread out. Especially
it was
regarding
supposed
Batman.
to. So Batman vs Superman essentially ended up like 3 movies getting smushed together.
That's what.
So it was supposed to be Man of Steel 2 with Metallo was supposed to be one of the big villains. Lex Luthor was supposed to be in it. And then, there was supposed to be a standalone Batman movie where, Ben Affleck's Batman is doing his thing, and we kind of got his backstory, and then, it shows the destruction of Metropolis and all the things, and shows why he wants to essentially kill Superman. And then it was supposed to lead, all of that was supposed to lead into Batman vs Superman, and then so on and so forth.
Right, like especially like with Batman vs Superman, I felt like the introduction of Wonder Woman in that movie and the rest of the metahumans, they call them, was a bit like
lackluster,
but mostly forced in a way, because those characters, they have so much in them in terms of lore, that to just have them just pop out of nowhere to like fight this monster Doomsday, it just felt really out of place, and it didn't give them like the proper introduction they needed. It just seemed like that they had not enough time to put them in there.
Yeah.
So they just
I think another thing, and I read about this years ago, so I don't know if I remember it exactly 100% correct. Batman vs Superman itself was also supposed to be like 2 separate movies.
I kind of heard that before, that it was going to be like this
it should
two-parter.
It should have been a 2-part thing.
I don't know how they could do that, like, while trying to bring it into the Justice League. I felt like it could have been great as a single movie, but I felt like a lot of this stuff they could have just pulled out and made it part of a different movie altogether.
Well, the big issue is the fact that, Warner Brothers is trying to compete with Disney and Marvel, and like, oh, we have to do this and get on it. When had they just taken their time, every movie, because technically Man of Steel was a success. It really was.
Right.
Every movie past Man of Steel would have been successful. It also would help if, they didn't mess with the original Suicide Squad movie, because they completely messed that up. The original villain for that was supposed to, I don't know, have you seen that one?
I have not seen that one.
Okay. So, Enchantress ends up being the villain.
Okay.
It was supposed to be Steppenwolf.
So it was actually supposed to lead into Justice League. Okay.
Yes. And then when Suicide Squad was coming out, that's around the time I think the first Deadpool movie came out.
Okay.
So Warner Bros. Was like, ooh, you should make it funny like Deadpool.
That doesn't sound like it would have worked, especially with the tone of these Zack Snyder movies.
And honestly, the issue is they've, in the past few years, DC has for some reason tried turning Harley Quinn into DC's version of Deadpool.
I don't think it could ever work, because Deadpool, the people who are attracted to Deadpool is because he's just off, killed her in its humor, like very much like a fourth wall breaker.
Mm-hmm.
While Harley Quinn is just supposed to be someone whose character is developed from like trying to be more of a hero than being a sidekick to a villain.
It was that she was just meant to be a one-off character as a henchman, and the reason she kept coming back is because people loved her so much. And
like I like both Deadpool and I like Harley Quinn. It just felt like a lot of things you could do with Harley Quinn you can't do like with Deadpool and vice versa.
Yeah.
I think Harley Quinn could have been just like funny in personality, but not exactly like some comedic character, like to be like relatable to the audience because she's supposed to be crazy.
Yeah. Like it works for Deadpool, but it doesn't really work for any other character. Because like that's been Deadpool's thing since he's been around. Like Rob Liefeld did an amazing job creating Deadpool. There's not another character like him. There's never going to be another character like him. You can't.
Yeah, you can't try to fit a square peg into a circle hole. Like you can't like just make one character be this other character when it's not that character.
Yep.
Like one thing that I kind of noticed in a way is that Justice League is very like similar to tonality as Infinity War. Like I feel like they tried to like speed up the pace from like saying Avengers 1 straight up to Infinity War in terms of like what they were trying to keep up with. Like it felt like the next movie was going to be the last movie with how they like ended it.
So after all the big major changes that went through, and then so originally it's just going to be after the like original plans, Zack was like, all right, I'm going to have a 5-movie arc. It's going to be Man of Steel, Batman vs Superman, and then Justice League 1 through 1, 2, 3.
Right.
And that was going to be his major arc. And after that, going to be done. Everything could be rebooted. We have already like been done already with like, you know, had they not screwed him over and then the whole pandemic and everything. I lost my train of thought. What was I saying?
You were saying something regarding like how they had plans for trilogy of Justice League movies.
Yeah. So like, you know, in the first one it ends with, you know, Superman kind of staring down Darkseid and whatnot. The second one was supposed to be Darkseid comes to Earth
and absolutely like wrecks the Justice League.
Pretty much. So Lex Luthor uses the Riddler to solve the anti-life equation and then gives it to Darkseid. Darkseid kills Lois Lane. That makes Superman succumb to the anti-life equation, so he's under
Darkseid's control.
Yep, and that's the whole alternate timeline thing. So the nightmare sequence, that's what that is, and it's kind of like the current timeline and the nightmare timeline are
like converging to this one point.
Yeah, and Barry and other people are trying to get current timeline Bruce to make sure that future
timeline stays there
and that none of that happens. So that's the whole point of that.
No, I get that. I feel like I'm not a big fan of exposition in the slightest. I wish that when you put it on a screen, that whatever you put on should explain itself like the second it's there. But I feel like with alternate timelines, it really should have had some dialogue or some more dialogue regarding it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to disagree with you on that just because if you pay attention to those movies, everything's there.
Yeah. But when it's a story like a superhero movie about like action and like you're trying to get this whole story to coincide together, but if you're just a new time viewer and like if you're not like me and you saw them like marathon them, but you just saw like one movie later on, none of it would make any sense.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Only it kind of just caters to the people who are sticking on the ride rather than just hopping on.
So there was a big issue for a lot of people with the theatrical cut of Batman vs Superman. How, you know, it didn't make sense. It kept flip-flopping all over the place and whatnot. It's like, you know, I didn't have that issue. I followed, like, for me, that was a movie I'd waited like my whole life to see. So, like, to me, it made sense. And, it does kind of, like, flip around a lot for the theatrical cut. I was like, well, to me, it's just like, you flip through a comic, on one page you're here, then on the next is like a completely different thing. It's like, oh, makes sense. And then you see the Ultimate Edition with that extra 30 minutes or so, and everything that people complained about is fixed. Like, the pacing's slightly better. The questions that aren't answered in the theatrical cut are answered. And it's the information is there. Zack Snyder's movies are not movies that you can just sit there and turn off your brain.
I thought Dawn of the Dead I could have turned off my brain. It was just.
Well, that's because it was a remake.
Movie. Yeah, what? It was a remake. It was very cut and dry, but
it's also a horror movie. So.
Yeah, I get to turn off my brain.
Most of his stuff.
I know, like, a lot of his...
You got to pay attention.
I mean, a lot of his movies, like, I can understand if you have this movie where you have these talks, like, especially with, like, whole Batman versus Superman movie, kind of just having this big old theme of, like, what would happen if man went against God and did his best because it was, like, an existential threat. Mm-hmm. I got that. I mean, like, I can understand when you have these questions and you want to just pace it out in a way that it frames it in the perfect timing. And you might need a lot of time for that. But I felt like at some points it felt too on the nose, and sometimes I felt like it was really trying to hammer it in, especially with, like, the scene with, like, Lex on the rooftop trying to talk about it, and it felt like, you know what, I kind of already got it already. I mean, I could do without you.
Yeah, I rather enjoyed his iteration of Lex Luthor.
It's a new, interesting take. I mean, like, it's definitely not like the old Lex Luthor's, like, renditions.
Yeah.
But I'm okay with it. It kind of, like, follows, like, the tropes of, like, the new billionaires being more timid and, like, not encountering, like, actual, like, people.
Well, what I really like is, to me, he's not very intimidating, like you said. And he kind of comes off as slightly insane.
Like, he's like, to me, he feels like more of a trickster character, like one that, like, always does something to later, like, screw up everything, like, later on in like a bad way, like out of, like, spite, what have you, but never like a sincere, like, hatred for, like, Superman. It's always seemed like I want to just be the one that does it.
So, to me, what I really like is, like, he plays the character so intelligently. It's like, wow, the reason he acts like this is because he's so smart that he's gone insane. Right. It also doesn't help that growing up, because in the movies, like, essentially, like, my dad used to beat the hell out of me and all this. You didn't pick up on that, did you?
No.
Yeah, so he was abused as a child by his father.
Oh, okay. I remember hearing about him talking about his father, like, throughout, but it just, I thought he was, like, kind of, like, just giving, like, lip to, like, people who were just talking about, like, wanting to see Lex Luthor. No. But dang, like, there's a bit more than that.
So I know earlier you said you probably wouldn't go back and watch these movies again. I think you might want to go back and watch these movies again.
I probably should. It just feels like, though, it's demanding so much attention from me.
It is.
And, like,
it's a lot of time.
Like,
but the more you watch it, the more you pick up on, and the more everything makes sense.
Right. I mean, like, it'll be great if you're, like, a super fan. This definitely is, like, these are the types of movies for you. But, like, I grew up on, like, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, and, like, I've seen, like, the Tim Burton ones, and, like, I can just watch those and put it down and be like, you know what, this was an enjoyable ride, and I liked the story they told, and, like, I kind of got it from, like, the first time I watched it, and, like, it's not for everybody that time. Some people like that kind of interactivity where they try to decipher every single instance, because you end up finding more things for it. Mm-hmm. But for a general audience, like, for me, like, an average Joe, like, it's kind of, like, hard for me to keep this attention when you demand so much time for me to pay attention.
That's fair.
Like, I've seen, like, an article, I forgot the site, but it was talking about the people on HBO Max, the people who watch the Zack Snyder cut. Apparently, like, 38% of the people actually finished the movie. The majority like started it and like cut off maybe like a half an hour later, and like it's sad to see, but I feel like the people who watched it were fans and people who enjoyed it were the fans, and there's nothing wrong with that in the slightest. But it just feels like
when he got permission to do his cut and they were going to release it on HBO Max, he wanted to do it as a miniseries. He didn't want to release it all as like one big movie.
Right.
Which is why like there's the pauses and
the
like,
parts, like sequences, and like that it shows and it makes sense. And honestly, I appreciate that Zack Snyder did that.
Yeah.
Just because I know that this is his cut and this is how he wanted it done.
Now, personally, would I want to see it without all that and it just goes straight through? Absolutely. But you know, I remember going to see Lord of the Rings in theaters as a kid and sitting there for God knows how long.
Yeah.
So like, for me, sitting down and watching a 4-hour-long movie,
or like with Star Wars and stuff, you're kind of used to these types of things.
Yeah, like for me to sit down and watch the Snyder Cut and it be 4 hours, that's nothing. I can do that. No biggie. I can pause it when need be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, I don't know. It just feels like it's based off of the type of people who like types of movies you watch. Like Lord of the Rings, that needs a time. These movies, they do need a time.
Yeah.
I just wish they had the timing stretched out into different movies, just because it gives them all the time they need without it ruining like the experience for people who watch because of how long it is.
Yeah, that's
like,
fair.
I like all the portrayals. Like I think Ben Affleck did a great job. Ezra Miller was really good as Barry, which was interesting because I kind of got a bit of like
a Wally vibe.
A Wally vibe from him, like how ecstatic he was and how like he wants to keep things lighthearted.
If I remember, Zack wanted him based off of more of the original runs of Barry Allen, where he was more comedic.
Okay.
So like now Barry's more the serious Flash, and like you know,
so things are very much different.
Yeah, but like you know, you go back and you watch the Justice League cartoon from when we were kids, and it like Wally's the funny guy.
Yeah, Ezra is basically like Wally West, but not Wally West, and like I'm okay with that. I'm just saying like they all did a great job. Gal Gadot did a great job as Wonder Woman. The only problem I had was with Aquaman, but that was because he wasn't there as much as say the rest of the Justice League. I wish it had more time. One thing I really didn't like though was the lanterns were there, but they had no influence in the movie. They just kind of existed in the world and that's it. I really wish there was a Green Lantern, and I understand why there wasn't any time, but I would have just put him in.
So he wanted to put Green Lanterns in, and the studio told him no. So at the end of the Snyder Cut, he meets Martian Manhunter.
Yeah.
So that was originally supposed to be Jon Stewart.
Oh, so he
played by Wayne Carr.
Okay.
Funnily enough, that scene was shot in his driveway.
It kind of it's just real quick, just quick CGI, just saying, oh, by the way, they call me Martian Manhunter, and that was it, and flies away. I mean, like, I appreciate that they put him in there, but to not have the lanterns, but the thing, they talked about the lanterns like a few times throughout that movie, and they had them fight. Like I've seen one get their freaking hand cut off.
That's why he was going to put Jon Stewart at the end, and then they told him no because we're using Green Lantern for such and such. He's like, okay, well then can I use Martian Manhunter? And they're like, sure, whatever.
I never seen anything from Green Lantern after
but he shot it anyway for Green Lantern.
Okay.
He did that on his own without studio permission, and he showed like, look, this is what I did. Look how nice this looks, right?
And they refused.
Yeah.
I mean,
but the scene was supposed to be Jon Stewart, I think Kilowog, and Tomar Ray.
I mean, I would have liked it that way. Martian Manhunter, I appreciate that he was there. I would like to see Martian Manhunter. But the story of Martian Manhunter, like, it needs its own movie. Like,
I agree.
The whole, like, Martian invasion and everything like that, the alien species, I think that needs its own time, and it would have been better off for him than, say, just having him in the end, just out of nowhere. Especially with him being, like, a character with disguises and cloaking and, like, all these other abilities.
Although, I did kind of like his arc throughout the 3 movies. It was like, he's the secret alien fighting against the alien that the world knows about now, and then And Batman vs Superman's like, look, I can't exactly help out, but like, here's information on things you need to know. And then, come full circle with the Snyder Cut, and he's like, all right, well, if he can be accepted, I feel like I can probably be accepted too, and I can help protect this world that is now my home.
If they had time to put that in, I would have appreciated it. Like, I know they couldn't for this because it was a big old clash between this Steppenwolf villain. I think if they just had like just one movie in between to have them line up these stories together, like just put like Justice League Part 1, Part 2, it would have been perfect. But they didn't.
So, I mean, and I'm sure you've probably seen it, the whole sell the Snyderverse to Netflix thing.
I believe it or not, I have not.
So, as a fan of Zack Snyder myself, I would love the idea to see his universe, get to finish that story as like DC Elseworlds. But a lot of fans are like, oh, well, let's just sell it to Netflix because that's where Zack's working at right now. Netflix would be great for the Snyderverse and yada yada. It's like, no. First of all, the Snyderverse isn't an IP that you can just sell.
It's DC's. It's Warner Brothers. They have to agree to it.
Like, and the amount of money that Netflix would have to pay Warner Brothers and DC for the licensing of those characters, then for the rights to the movies and everything else, then they have to pay to make the movies. And at this point, Ben Affleck's 50 years old.
Yeah, he's getting a bit too old. Not to say he can't do it.
Yeah, not to say he can't do it.
He might have other ideas in mind. Like he's already past this point.
Ben's 50. Henry's about to be 40, which, Henry Cavill could go on as Superman for another 10 years.
I just feel like if they want to finish this Snyderverse like story, this big arc, there's a few ways you can do it. I think ideally it'll be more movies or more TV shows, but I don't think that's going to happen. I honestly think the best you can do is just maybe like do a couple graphic novels and just have the story be done through that with Zack Snyder like overseeing like the entire like project.
I want to see it animated.
I would too. I mean,
did you see the episode of Teen Titans Go that Zack Snyder did?
I had never seen a single episode of Teen Titans Go.
So
I feel great saying that though. I mean, like,
so
I'm glad
he did an episode of Teen Titans Go, and it ended up. So it was like, how would you direct us if we were in a Zack Snyder movie? He was like, okay. So they changed up the animation style to something to Zack's style. It's honestly really cool.
I mean, I wanted to see it. I mean, I'll take my own time to see it.
So like I feel like that animation style, because I know all of them would come back. I mean, Ben Affleck was literally at the last night of SnyderCon.
Okay.
Ray Fisher, who played Cyborg, was there. Ray Porter, who voiced Darkseid, was there.
One thing about the movie, right? I didn't like how Darkseid was all CGI. I really wished he was like an actor. He could, like,
so it was mocap.
Yeah.
And the guy who voiced him did the mocap for him. Granted, he didn't move a whole lot.
It just felt like it was a bit over, like the illusion of it being like somebody was like given up. Like I can just tell it was just some CGI monster. Kind of like how like Steppenwolf kind of was. Yeah. But Steppenwolf had good CGI. It was like a bit of like a Doomsday in a way.
I think Zack Snyder's films always have like some of the most absolutely incredible CGI. Like for me, like in the flashback where for the first time Darkseid comes to Earth, he crashes down, he grabs the dirt, like you can feel it. Like you can just you can see what it's like for the sand pouring out of his hand. Like you can see that, what it feels like.
There were some scenes in Justice League that the CGI was like absolutely outstanding, especially with the Flash like stopping time and like reversing it, and that point when they were like in that big war, like during the first battle against Darkseid. But there were some scenes like the nightmare scenes with like I think Cyborg was going like into this nightmare scenario, like the alternate timeline, and like it just felt like he was in a green screen room, and it just felt like okay, this was probably one of those things that was rushed, or like this was probably one of those things that they didn't have time to do.
When Zack got the okay to do the Snyder cut, all that was needed to do really was finish up the CGI, and then he filmed 2 additional scenes. And it was the Martian Manhunter scene, and then the final nightmare sequence between Joker and Batman. And they didn't even film that scene together.
It shows, because you always see like a clip of like Batman and a clip of Joker, but never Batman and Joker.
Yeah, they did it during the pandemic. So they had to work around that, and then Jared Leto has his stuff that he has to do. Ben Affleck had his stuff that he had to do, so they couldn't probably like make it work at the same time. But the fact that they were both willing to come in and be like, yeah, I'll come do this for you, I think is incredible.
I felt like it was needed in a way, because like Batman and Joker are like basically like you can't have one without the other, and you just have this whole thing without even talking about them, just like some graffiti here and there from the Joker. It didn't feel like it was ever enough, especially since like Suicide Squad wasn't like really like tied in as much as like you think.
Yeah, well, Suicide Squad, Joker was also supposed to have a bigger part in that, and then I think they cut out like 40% of what Jared Leto filmed.
I would never understand why, because like, I mean, like I'm more partial to the older versions of Joker, granted, but I mean, from what I've seen in Justice League, he did fine being Joker. I mean, like, how bad could it possibly be?
It's not. So in the Suicide Squad, he had like tattoos all over his body and his face. And
I've seen a photo shoot of that.
And he had the broken teeth and all that. But like, it gets explained. Like the reason his teeth are broken is because he killed Dick Grayson. Okay. Because if you didn't pick up on it, Dick Grayson's the dead Robin. I
mean, I know he killed a Robin. I thought that was going to be like the one that came after.
Jason Todd.
Yeah.
So it was supposed to. That's who it's supposed to be. But that is the one decision that Zack Snyder made in his entire trilogy that I just do not stand by, and I can't stand, is the fact that he killed Dick Grayson.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think you can't stand by that one?
I mean, I don't. I may or may not be wearing a Nightwing shirt right now.
Oh, that's what it is? I thought it was like a Harvey Birdman shirt.
Please tell me you're joking.
Don't worry, I am. Okay. I mean, like, I like Nightwing. I mean, like, it just feels out of place to just switch names around just so you can make it fit. I mean, it is what it is.
And I've seen it somewhere. I don't remember. I don't know the run. I don't know the issue or whatever. But I've seen it. And it was like Batman had said something about if anyone ever killed Dick Grayson, I would kill that person. And
it was Joker.
If you think about that, because, Dick Grayson's his favorite. He's the favorite Robin. He's the favorite son. All the things. You think about that, then Joker kills Dick Grayson. It's like, that's why he's so violent, because he killed the first Robin, his first knight, however you want to put it, and that would send anyone over the edge. You kind of see that, especially when Batman started branding the people he caught, and he was just getting more and more violent, because I know Alfred was trying to say, oh, it's because now you're facing this like godlike being. Now you feel like you can't do enough, and that's why you're being more like dangerous in your like methods. And it's a bit of that, but it was also this like not talked about as much scene with like about like Dick Grayson dying, which can put people to the edge. I mean, like I think Bruce Wayne in that movie knew that, and that's why he was always trying to like keep Alfred to anchor him. In a way, the one thing for sure with Dawn of Justice was that it felt like there was not enough dialogue between Bruce and Clark Kent. It felt like it was just that one scene, and they never like
cross minds or so to see if they were good or bad, like
Yeah.
good friends or enemies on a deeper level.
Yeah, so there's like the one scene of Bruce and Clark, and then there's the first scene of Batman and Superman. But they never get around each other again until the end where they fight.
Right, and it felt weird because you had this scene in the party where Superman can hear everything like Batman is communicating through like with Alfred, but they never go beyond that. He just kind of hears it and that's it.
Yeah.
So it's like weird how they have this thing where Superman kind of knows what's going on, but doesn't do anything about it, and he just like acts like
he's going to do something. He's going to say something to Bruce, and then he sees that fire or whatever is going on in Mexico.
Oh, okay,
so he's like, "Oh, I need to go there right now."
I didn't like when that happened in a way. I get why they had to do it, but I felt like they could have went back to that later. It felt like the fact that they didn't go back to that.
Yeah, I think there definitely could have been a follow-up.
Yeah, they didn't have any dialogue, period. Like, it could have been like with Lois and like, something's up with that guy, Bruce. And I want to know what. He seems like a nice guy, but he seems like he's hiding something, and I don't like that. And that would be a good thing to say, okay, all right, now we know, like, you trust him, but there's something about him that he doesn't trust, and he was Batman.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of things that could be done but wasn't, and it was just really like, I could say it's like Warner Brothers and stuff, but I felt like they could have timed everything right, and they could have cut out things that they couldn't follow up with.
Well, again, it's Warner Brothers is like on his ass. They're like, you need to include this, 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 and this, and you need to hurry all of this stuff up so that we can make more money off of it. So,
I think that was like Warner Brothers' like fault, like with how come it didn't go so well.
Yeah.
Just because like Marvel, Disney with Marvel, they had all the time to make as many movies as they need to. They had all this time to plan, to decide what's good and what's not. But DC should have just had that time as well. Instead of like playing catch up, they should have just went and done their thing, and they were just got all these fans who were going to watch it anyway.
Yeah.
But because they were trying to play catch up with this thing that's already like at its peak, they screwed up. They thought they can climb that mountain as fast as they could to beat them, but they could never do that, and should have accepted it sooner. And that's why it didn't go so well. I'm glad now that Disney's Marvel movies are like kind of going down in quality, and the hype is slowly dying off, that they can take the time this time to create this more grander, and better universe where it can have some more staying power and more like everlasting effect on the audience.
And we're going to continue up next time with part 2 of Zack Snyder.